This is Christine Russo, and welcome to What Just Happened. Today we have Joe Corbin, CEO and founder of Jumpmind.
Hey, Christine, nice to meet you.
It's great to see you too. What's great is that I believe we both went through the fire in terms of retail, and I feel a kindred spirit with you.
Certainly have. I've been on the other side of things at a software company now, but definitely spent my time in retail.
I'd love to hear how that informed your formation of this company and solving so many pain points. Abercrombie, in the heyday of brick and mortar, POS, IT, getting all that done as seamlessly as possible.
It's interesting. When I was at Abercrombie, it was in the heyday. It was back when Abercrombie was, and they're killing it now. And this was back when they were killing it before. So in the mid 2000s, and Abercrombie was on a very much of an international growth trajectory. So I think the real estate group was buying any property they could on the biggest streets in every major city all over the world. And that put a lot of pressure, of course, on a technologist like myself and the teams that we had to figure, okay, we own a location in Milan. How do we do business in Milan? We own a location in Tokyo. How do we do business in Tokyo? And the way it informed what we do at my company now is we look at retail a little bit differently. It's complex when you're a large enterprise size merchant. And our whole team is built up of folks that have worked in that space. And you just realize there's a difference between 5 stores and 10 devices a store in that kind of a state, from what I was managing and dealing with 21 different countries and 1,500 stores and 5 to 10 to 20 devices per store. It's just different challenges. We really focus on how do we help retailers with those challenges? Because to your point about being in the fire, we've been there. We've dealt with the pain that's involved in that and the challenges that exist with those kind of solutions.
Very interesting. Not to dwell in the past too much, but so you're telling me these were owner-operated international stores? Because my experience was that they were licensed. I can't even imagine trying to manage the technology side across borders.
Yeah, it was all owner-operated. We owned and operated the things in Italy and the things in Hong Kong and Japan, and it was so many countries. Back then, we were just growing and growing, so me and others would travel. Like I remember going with our head of indirect tax and our assistant treasurer to go to China and be like, okay, let's sit down with the local authorities. Let's sit down with the accounting firms to figure out, okay, how do we actually transact here? How do we do business from a POS and a store operations perspective? So super interesting. But it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it. And it definitely has helped inform what we do at Jumpmind and how we look at the world.
So POS back in those days, it's the old world because it's just the world is so entirely different now. So let's talk about what like a POS. By the way, can we change the name? I think part of the issue is
you want to change it?
Point of sale is forever going to be associated with those days. In my view, I'm just like a associationist. I'm like, okay, this is that. What's the quickest path to figuring out what you're talking about? Right. I'm thinking of keeping POS and keeping it as point of service.
I think that's fair because I think the thought process is that it's more about engaging the associate with the customer with all the things that they need to do together. So when we look at it, we really talk a lot about AX, associate experience, because the key for us isn't CX. That's the ultimate goal for every retailer, of course. But for a POS solution, a point of service solution, to the point, our engagement is with the associate. So if we can affect the associate's experience and provide it in a seamless way, provide think of an omni-channel journey, right? Like I want to buy something that they don't have my size in, I'm going to ship it. The associate hopefully is going to offer to ship it to my house or pick it up somewhere else. If I provide that as a software technology provided in a way that's really seamless, then we're more likely to have the engagement that the retailer's hoping. But I think it has changed quite a bit. I think that the world of old POS, point of sale, I suppose, to your point, it was very monolithic solutions that were really brittle and difficult to maintain, to update. And a number of retailers over the past 10 years have been really focused on digital transformation versus store transformation. So I think the pandemic really was this period when you noticed all the digital transformation that had occurred, leaving the stores behind. I think most retailers found that our old brittle monolithic solutions just weren't able to keep up with the pace of change required. Hence, I think bringing in a new era of modern technology, more akin to what in the e-commerce space.
So I really want to delve into associate experience, AX. You don't hear that. So kudos to you for coming up with a new set of letters for us to get to know, because we need that. We need more letters. But this actually speaks, it's very clear. It's very directional in terms of what you're actually speaking to, which again, is people are wanting to know very quickly what you're talking about, that does that. So we have AX. So I think the issue is that when you talk about omni-channel, POS, digital transformation, there is no human mostly in those conversations, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe the customer, to your point, but oh, this should all happen without any human intervention. Guess what? In stores, there are. Yeah, there are. So let's talk about why that matters.
It's a very good point. I try and sit down and we were talking through a process. You take something like that buy online or buy in store, ship to my house type of thing, endless aisle. There's a human there, clearly. And the amount of friction that you provide in that experience to a customer through that associate determines the likelihood at which that transaction or that order actually gets placed. So an example would be I was buying new CrossFit shoes. They had the color I wanted, but not my size. I know this retailer provides endless aisle. We're technologists and in the retail space, but the young man didn't offer it to me. I also know that they have it on disparate devices. So they've got an inventory device, they have a POS device, and they have an Omni one from their OMS provider. So he knew that he didn't have the inventory, but he didn't offer me the rest of the journey. So I feel like when you're a retailer and really thinking about this, you have to think about, what am I expecting my associates to do? I talked to another retailer that told me they have 33 or 34 apps that their associates use. And my thought was, how many do they really use? Trying to really look at the associate experience and saying, how can I simplify? Because if I provide a simple, seamless way that they could have offered me the shoe to be shipped to my house, I would not have ordered it on my way to my car as I walked using my own phone. Another quick example, Christine, is I was at another store and I was looking for a Patagonia duffel bag and they didn't have the color my wife and I wanted. So the guy was very nice and he told me that, hey, we can order it for you. You just have to go up front to the customer service or whatever. So we started taking steps. I swear to you, this wasn't even me like messing around. We started taking steps towards the front, and then we both just looked at it and said, let's forget it. I'll deal with it later or whatever. So that moment that they had me was lost because they introduced friction in that process. So that's where I think you really have to bring the human element of stores are different. You aren't interacting directly with the customer, your associates are.
I think the gold standard of digital transformation was falsely defined as no human interaction. And I think we need to backpedal on that and then solve these problems, because we all have our own personal experiences, or they're very clear that there's money being left on the table. Yeah. I think also once you move the transaction from in-store to on a personal device is, well, someone else might be running a sale on it and I'm out of your ecosystem now because I just put it on the search bar and off it takes fair game. Now everyone can have a bite. I can try for me, come at me, I should say. Yeah, so there's that. But I do have a question for you, because I'm fully supportive of this new evolution, but actually, does every associate get armed with a device? Because as you're telling me the footwear story, I'm like, I'm sure he was empty-handed. I'm sure he didn't have anything in his hand. The answer is to empower him to be like, beep, bop, boop, no steps, like in your other story, and deal with it. But are retailers investing in that many pieces to have it one-to-one?
I think we're seeing that one-to-one in that the associates that are on the floor all have a device, right? So it might be on a tablet, it might be a handheld device because you're doing more inventory type stuff. And there's a purpose behind all of them, right? You might have a more engaged experience potentially on a tablet versus a handheld. But I think my opinion would be, even if you're doing inventory, you still ought to be able to help me with an order. Because if you're walking around the store and you're wearing the shirt of the store that you're working at or have a name tag on, we're likely to ask you a question as consumers. So empowering them with one thing that does it all, or at least provides the ability to do it all, I think provides that better associate experience in the end.
How about when you go into a large store and you're like, hey, do you have Goya kidney beans? And they start walking and looking. I'm like, no, wait, I can do that.
Right. That happened to me the other day.
I can do that.
we're walking the same aisles I already walked.
You realize about a third of the way in, I'm just following someone who doesn't know what they're doing and looking. And I'm like, I can do that now. I'm mad.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's one of those where you're like, I end up just saying, never mind, I'll figure it out when the end, or you leave and you order it online or whatever it might be. When it comes to commodity items, a retailer is leaving a lot of money on the table when they aren't at least as good as their neighbor is, because we have lots of options for where we want to buy these sorts of things, including, back to the point on e-commerce, just on our phone.
So how does Jumpmind fit in as a solution provider?
We focus on the store experience, to be clear. So I mentioned AX, and really we look at it and say, how can we simplify everything for the associate? We're focused really on enterprise, large retail type of problems, back to my heritage at Abercrombie & Fitch, and really understanding the challenges that exist with those multinational deployments and large format stores. There's a couple in Tokyo and Fifth Avenue, things like that, that are 12 floor type of setups. So we're really focused on that type of merchant and helping them with the agility that a 5-store chain might have, or that an e-commerce type of experience or site might have. If you think of e-commerce, it's one of those where you deploy it to one place. Most retailers update their e-commerce site on a daily, weekly basis. They're constantly iterating and A/B testing and trying new things. But historically, that's never happened in the stores because it's too complicated. If I've got to go update 9,000 devices, that's more complicated than one, cloud instance of a site that gets managed by a cloud provider. So what we've done is looked at it and said, how do we provide the same agility? We tend to say agility at scale. So the same agility of a 5-store chain at the scale of 1,500 stores, like the Abercrombie example, when tens of thousands of devices and those sorts of things.
So I do want to get into the Symmetric DS piece. A lot of buzz right now on data, clean data, and how it relates to using generative AI and LLMs. Talk to me about some of this.
Symmetric's really our founding, and when we got started was in helping. At the time, it was retailers, and now the product is leveraged in 300 or 400 customers globally in tons of different industries, from retail to telecommunications to cruise lines, all those sorts of things. And what it's all meant to do is help retailers move data between individual locations. So if I think of a store environment, it'd be like some data in the back to data that's in central to data in a data warehouse. And these days, what I think you see is a lot of companies leveraging cloud analytics platforms like Snowflake and others, and looking at NoSQL type of data stores and how to take data and move it into those document type of data stores. So Symmetric DS is a tool that really simplifies it so that a company can do it across all the different types of environments they might be in. And some of the big ones we see are moving from cloud to cloud. Like I have compute occurring in one cloud doing a specific need that's generating data, and I have analytics occurring in another cloud that's part of a data platform or data warehousing, or to your point, an AI or machine learning group that we're working with. And how do I keep the data between those synced? And the challenge I think that exists out there is that while cloud providers are really good at working with their own environments, and database platforms are very good at working with their own databases, when you have multi database or multiple cloud type of environment, that's where it gets challenging. So Symmetric DS is a tool that's meant to bridge all of those, so that I can move data from on-premise to cloud, initial loads, all those sorts of things that can be really challenging, especially when you're talking about the volumes of data that retailers and every kind of company on the planet generates.
Okay, don't you see a uptick in this side of the business in the past 18 months? Haven't you seen that? We
have that, and been really in the traditional ETL side of things too, right? How do I transform data that's moving? Because again, trying to get it into between platforms and moving them between clouds appropriately and at speed. And what's really cool about Symmetric DS is that it gives you the ability to move the data back and forth. So it's not just unidirectional. We enable bidirectional. So you have situations where you might be using data in one cloud and then doing something with machine learning or AI in another cloud for whatever reason, and you need to get that back into the original maybe operational store. And Symmetric really gives you the ability to do all that. So huge uptick, I think, in moving data all around, because everybody's either making a migration to the cloud, moving to the cloud, moving between clouds, or just ultimately still in this kind of on-premise mode where they're keeping their data sync between all their legacy systems.
Got it.
So you think back to my time at Abercrombie, the challenge there was moving data between all of the stores, so 1,500 stores, all the registers in all of those stores, to a central data store at the time, which was in New Albany, Ohio, where Abercrombie is headquartered. So that in keeping data in residence in China for specific legislation that's required for that sort of things, and moving data between environments that might be in some of the EU countries and those sorts of things. So that's where it really got its start, and worked with a variety of retailers from Big Lots to Dollar General to a bunch of different retailers in that space. And then from there, we got into the commerce space.
And at that time, it wasn't even like the data wasn't being used for the personalization, let's just say, that's going on now. Very interesting. Okay, so now it's like insane. Now
it is.
Yeah, it's like. Yeah.
The beauty of what we've done with Symmetric is we've got our lineage was hardened data synchronization as it was required for on-premise solutions that were occurring in the late 2000s around retail. And over time, as the migration to the cloud has picked up faster and faster, and then obviously, to your point about AI and machine learning, those require massive data sets. Symmetric DS has taken that hardened capability and then leveraging it in that new cloud and AI world.
Okay, let's talk for a second about migration to the cloud, because I was on a call prior to this, and they seem to think that everyone was migrated. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not the case. And that there are people falling further behind because you might have been like, I'll get to it. And then now you don't have access to the next best thing because you didn't do that. Am I wrong? I mean, it's fine.
No, I think you're right. I think everybody's on some journey towards the cloud. I think it's inevitable for every company, but legacy technology in core parts of a business make it impossible in certain situations, right? You're not going to take the risk of just migrating for migrating's sake. In our conversations with retailers, I think some of it's aspirational. They're to the degree that they're cloud ready or running in the cloud. Others are super sophisticated in the cloud and have been moving workloads for years and have really embraced it. But I think it's along a spectrum. It's certainly not everybody is quote unquote moved to the cloud. There's still a lot of on-premise solutions out there.
Okay. Why hasn't this generative AI, GPT moment in history really kickstarted everyone into the cloud?
I think it's really cool, like for starters, right? And it's fun to play with, and ChatGPT and the things it can do is pretty amazing. But I think it's still, like everything we do as technologists, it's what's the problem I'm trying to solve? When we as a company look at AI and ChatGPT and generative and all these things and say, okay, that's awesome, but what can I do with it that changes the experience that the associate has and the experience that they provide to the customer? And I think that's why it's not, and retailers aren't bleeding edge either. Generally, retailers are very like, let's make sure this is going to have an ROI and solve a problem versus let's just throw resources, time, and energy at this. So to me, we're all looking for what are the things it can assist with. And as those start unveiling themselves and more vendors like myself and software companies are able to invest in looking into it, trying things with kind of fail fast mentality of what works in store and what doesn't, I think you'll see more of it. I think it's just at the very beginning of it, from my perspective.
Got it.
And there's areas that it makes more sense in than others. Big workloads, to the point about data a moment ago, Christine, makes complete sense, right? Because a human being involved in that, right? It's too much information to digest. It's too much information to write rules around. So you use AI to solve that. But when you think of the store experience, it's still back to that omni thing we were talking about before, and how there is a human in the middle of that. So really, if you're thinking of stores, I've got to empower the associate or that human. So what does AI do for me that moves the needle for them?
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet where it's like personal assistant or executive assistant for each person, but I think we are headed there, and that's being worked out. One of the interact case studies that you have is it's actually not an AX, it's a CX. It's building a Build-A-Bear where the customer is actually interacting with the device. So it's a little bit on the flip side, but do you want to talk about that for a moment?
Yeah. So that's probably the area that we do really interact with the customer, and Build-A-Bear is a great example of that. So if you think of how Build-A-Bear operates, and I took my son to build a T-Rex a few months ago, and you pick out the bear. In his case, it was a dinosaur, and you go through the whole stuffing exercise and picking a heart and hugging it and the whole thing, right? Very immersive. And he sleeps with it most nights with his arm over top of it. So it's super cute. But that whole interactive experience gets lost at checkout. So we have a component, just because it's like clunky. It's not as immersive, and it's not meant to be fully, right? At the end of the day, once you build the dinosaur, it's let me pay for it and get home so he can take his nap with his dinosaur type of thing. But it should be free of friction like everything else. So what Build-A-Bear is doing is using a component that we call CX Connect. And it's really about putting an experience in front of the customer during checkout for the sole reason of simplifying things. When I'm checking out at a grocery store that I tend to go to, they allow you to enter in your phone number for loyalty and those sorts of things. And it's all a very clunky experience because oftentimes it's on a kind of a payment entry device, or it's on a secondary display, or whatever it might be. This puts like an iPad or an Android tablet in front of a customer, enables them to see recommendations. So if you think of a T-Rex and Build-A-Bear, they oftentimes would recommend clothes that fit them, a hat, a personalized whatever for that bear or that stuffed animal. Being able to provide that to the customer directly there during the process, allowing them to self-identify for loyalty. So think of using a QR code on your phone and using a front-facing camera to be able to scan that and be a known customer, those sorts of things. So for us, that really changes the way that the behavior tends to be in a checkout experience and enables the customer to engage themselves while the associate is ultimately going through the process of, scanning the item and placing an order and taking payment and those sorts of things.
Yeah, I love Build-A-Bear. I think that really adds to the whole experience. Do they still give out birth certificates?
They do. Yeah, their big thing is really around their parties. So I think when you think of seamless experience, it's bring checkout to the party, right? If you're there with your kids and they're trying to buy an extra outfit for the bear that they made, it's, again, get rid of friction, make this easy. It shouldn't be that complicated. And that's where mobility and putting that experience in front of the customer can really simplify things.
You mean like a birthday party? Like they do?
Yeah,
okay.
They do.
Put that on the bill of the host. No, what are you doing?
Yeah, I think it depends on how generous the host is, I think. Ultimately.
What are you doing to me?
Yeah, exactly.
Now I got a crying kid who wants me to buy him all the things.
That's probably part of the idea. But
yeah, just the shut up, here, I'll get it for you. Let's go home.
Just take it and let's go.
Yeah. I really think you're breaking through on and transforming the experience from those two perspectives, from the associate's perspective and the customer's perspective. And I'm glad we had the opportunity to walk through those scenarios.
We take the mentality of, we take a very human-centric design approach to the applications, because you're right. It's a variety of folks from a retailer that has a staff that's all over the age of 30 or 40 or even older, to retailers like American Eagle is a brand that runs Jumpmind Commerce, and their staff tends to be high school age or early college. I don't know about you, but if I download an app, I think this is pretty universal. It's if you download an app on an iPhone or your Android device and it doesn't work, or you check, it's not like something's weird about it, you delete it. So we've taken that kind of same approach of, you shouldn't need any training, and our retailers don't. There's always, when you're bringing on a new hire, there's some process training that you need to do about this is how we operate and those sorts of things. But when it comes to the application, American Eagle as an example, they just hand an iPad to their associates because it's meant to be intuitive. You shouldn't have to go through a manual to figure out how to use a tablet and transact. It's that straightforward. And there's a couple things that are an advantage. Of course, there's the whole side of AX to CX that we've talked about. If it's simpler, I'm more likely to do it. But the other is just real dollar savings, right? If I was going to train every associate that starts new, and we know the turnover in retail is really obviously extremely high. If I was going to train everyone for 2 hours as an example, and I've got 50,000 people over a period, Think of how much money you ultimately save by not having to go through that process.
This has been a very human-centric conversation with Joe Corbin. I really think that putting the human experience on both sides, all sides, really makes a difference and makes the product stand out. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you having me on, Christine. This has been fun.
It's my pleasure.